Hello everybody, welcome to Sage Thyme. We have a reading coming to you today from the constellation of Aries. And of course, as always, you can apply this into how you relate to your natal chart, where Aries is in house placement, as well as any planets, asteroids, points of interest to you in the natal chart that are in the constellation of Aries. This applies to you whether or not you are working with the collective consciousness of tropical astrology or the higher level consciousness, and or you can work with both, of sidereal. So Aries has been talking to me all morning, and it's been an interesting journey. I love the distinction. As you know, I posted the Pisces, the sign before this, reading a day or two ago, and Pisces was the first one who came to me and said, we want you to switch readings instead of strictly reading for people who identify their placement with a constellation. Let us speak as a constellation. And I thought it was very perfect that Pisces was the one, the energy, the constellation to come forth first, because it is the 12th sign. And here we are now in Aries, the first sign of the zodiac, the I am. Aries wants to point out that the I am, the proclamation of self-identification, is by definition, is what the ego in Jungian philosophy and pretty much any well-established philosophy, it's a personality claim, and a personality claim that generally was put on us, given to us by parents, family, teachers, siblings, classmates, and so forth. And the personality, or personalities in truth, that we allow to ourselves to stake claim to, generally because as we're growing, we don't exactly understand all the nuance required to step out of personalities that are projected onto us. And Aries is here to say, the first sign of the zodiac, the I am ... is here to say we are all changing the narrative of what has been said about who we are. We're changing the narrative to mean something different, as well as we are shifting our archetypes. As you know, Aries, the constellation, houses Mars. Now, there's so much information coming in. Aries houses Mars. It also houses Eris. And you've heard in previous videos, if you've watched them, if not, check some of them out. I've discussed themes around Eris as the prodigal daughter. She has always come to me from a place of, I've been out in the greater expanse of the cosmos into other solar systems entirely, and I've come back with some wisdom to share. And when she came back and she was first identified as a potential planet, which she is, she's a dwarf planet. She's actually more substantial than Pluto in scientific ranking terms of what is a planet or not. So Eris is a true blue planet. She entered our ability to see her through the big telescopes and everything like that. She entered in the 20s, our awareness, and she did that in the 1920s, and she did that with Aries in the background. She was, at that point, for all the reasons, named Eris, the goddess of chaos and war, also known as the sibling to Mars. So it all fits nicely in this theme of Aries, the self-identification, the fire sign, often used with coin words like impetuous and, Mars being war, Aries being classified as chaos and the disruptor. And these ideas and labels and notions of anger and or reactivity, provocation, and the results from that. So not just war in the traditional sense, but warring between siblings or warring between families and neighbors and things like that. And Mars hasn't exactly caught on entirely to what it really means to delve deep into who he really is, not the archetype that was put on to him. But he got some pretty good clues. I noticed his influence was shifting during, I think it was last year's retrograde through Cancer and a bit Leo. But Cancer slowed Mars down, and he had a good think, and he realized something about how he identified himself wasn't pertinent anymore. It was irrelevant. And this notion of warring and fighting against and reactivity and impetuous, we're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but he's like, there's more to me, right? He's just not some dumb nut. There's more to him. And he's watching his sister Aries come back from the greater cosmos, from other solar systems that have entirely different concepts of culture and identification. And he's hearing Aries speak, and he wasn't really buying it at first, but she's showing up as who she is and what she's become and what she's learned. And she doesn't care if everybody else is calling her the goddess of chaos and disruption or destruction and things like that. She knows she's not that. She knows that's an old paradigm that really was put on her during her travels out into the great universe and multiverse, really, quite frankly. She's gathered that not only is she so much more than that, and she recognizes, she comes in as a disruptor, but there's an agenda within her that is incredibly altruistic and profoundly intelligent in recognition of a greater scope of what she's about. So she may come in and throw that apple down in the middle of the goddesses that think that they're all that and say something to the effect of, whomever picks up that apple first is the fairest of them all. But she's not coming in just to cause problems. She's coming in to say, and there's more to it than that. And if they listen, they listen. If they don't, they don't. And then they go through the motions, and she supports that as a facilitator for them to learn that there's so much more and they can be so much better than whom they have been. They don't need to be this superficial, I am beautiful and I am the goddess of the goddesses and et cetera, et cetera. They can be beautiful and enjoy that presentation of beauty, but it's not the priority, and they can realize that. And so she's a bit of a, I don't like the word prophet, no, a messenger. But a messenger that is well seasoned beyond the concepts of anybody in this constellation, any of these architects within our solar system, not constellation, these architects archetypes that we have in our solar system. She not only knows there's more, she sees the potential of Athena's archetype. She sees the potential of Aphrodite's archetype as so much bigger and more. My little fur buddy is down here panting. There's big energies coming in. And it's Aries. It's fire. It's va-va-va-voom. It's creative inertia, right? That masculine yang force is about inertia. Penetrating, moving, bringing information, codes. And the feminine, of course, being in that context, the receptivity of it, and then together alchemizing and creating something from it. You know, the fire meeting the creatrix and form coming from it. So Mars has been listening to Aries on his return, on her return, and he's kind of like, I don't know. I think she just maybe changed the stories of reality in her mind to excuse herself for behaving differently, you know, to not fit in or to cause problems. And Aries is like, let's look at the facts. Let's play the tape all the way through and look at all the points that I'm bringing together here that have always existed, but perhaps, Mars, you have been omitting them in your mind, omitting key facts and key points of what's really going on here in this impetuous of war, this program, this construct of win or lose, fighting against. If we put more of what is actually happening and you don't ignore those and put those to the side, then the truth starts to reveal itself. And it doesn't feel good when we see the whole truth, because we realize, oh crap, I've been running a program in my mind and acting on that in a way that's causing a lot of harm, and perhaps using the demise or the vulnerability of others for my own vanity, says Mars. My own, la-da-da, I'm warrior, I win. You know, and we're not just speaking of males here. We're speaking of the masculine that's in everything, whether it's an infectious overtake of blackberry bushes in your garden, or a pest that's taking over an entire forest. Certain types of ants will do that, right? Or if it's a woman whom feels that another person in her social structure, family structure, or work structure could threaten her role and her level of hierarchy. And so she starts slandering, gossiping, changing the story about who this other woman, say, that seemingly does or doesn't, but seemingly would be a threat to her position, her financial authority, which of course goes back to a sense of security and lack programs, right? Fear programs, fear-based programs. And so I think Mars is tuning his ears in. I want to sneeze, 1 second. On camera sneeze that didn't quite have to happen. Yay. But that is a confirmation for sure. It's a release, an expulsion. And Mars is expelling this idea of, I don't have to ignore the details of how this isn't working for some, and it's for most, but it's only working for the few. I don't have to ignore that to keep myself safe and on top. In fact, I'm hearing my sister Aries say we can all win. We don't have to be better than. There doesn't need to be a competition that knocks others down. More of a competition, let's reframe that, of let's refine our skills, and that's the agenda. And we'll keep doing that. We won't level each other out in doing so. We're going to really challenge each other, but with the intention and the awareness that we are boosting each other up, right? So now there's heart in Mars. There's a passion with an, I don't want to say altruism because he doesn't like that apparently, a passion with a fairness, right? So he can still be physically, energetically exerting himself. Mars likes to, the masculine, he likes to create things outside of himself, where the feminine likes to create within, often, in a more stark contrast. And Aries is saying, yes, yes, now you're getting it, my children, right? My Aries is kind of as a constellation. You could look at, we could call Mars and Aries and others, tickle, gods for the sake of terminology right now. And Aries would be considered an oversoul of those gods, the collective of those gods, included within its wholeness, right? Aries, a constellation of stars, of solar systems that communicate to one another, not simply by proxy and because from our earthly perspective they make a shape, right? Not strictly because of that, but because anything with consciousness creates form, thought form, right? We are a thought form. Human individuals are a formation of consciousness held together by intent. I said to a girlfriend of mine yesterday or a couple days ago, it just kind of came out, and I think it was a spin off of something I saw on animated series called Erebos or something like that. You'll know. If you know it, please say so in the comments. Anyway, the comment that I made to my girlfriend was, oh, what was it? We are all just stardust held together by love. And that sums it up. It came back to me. It just kind of came out. And it was kind of out of nowhere. And I just, texted it to her. And it came up again today. And I was like, are we all held together by love? Are we particles of consciousness or particles of atoms and so forth that create cells and all the different things? Are we really held together by love? And I heard Aries say, no, we're held together by the intent, the kind of emotion, but the higher level emotion, the intent of those that observe us, and also the lower levels of emotion I'm hearing. So that's a really big rabbit hole, and we're not going to get into that too much, but it is something for you to think about. So when we look at something like a constellation that was not a constellation until we called it that, and we say, oh, it's shaped like a ram's head or whatever, and there's another culture halfway across the planet or a few thousand miles southeast that says it's shaped like this, and it's all from a place of reference within the culture, and that constellation starts to receive all the observers' labels as well as the intentions behind it. So if we're saying, oh, it's this one animal and it's a warring animal and they butt heads and that's symbolic of it, it becomes that for us, the observers. And if the thought form, whether it's a constellation or a planet or a human or a horse or a caterpillar, depending on how much self-awareness that individual being or formation has of itself, it can counter it, alchemize it, or become it. Just like children become the appointment that their surrounding people tell them they are. Oh, so-and-so's, Tommy's shy. Oh, Andreas is a comedian. Oh, Juliana is intellectual, and they become that, and for reasons all around them, right? All the circumstances and things. We know about this. And it's the same for everything and everyone. We call a bird and categorize it as this, and this, right? Same with the constellation, but something like a constellation of so much time, experience, and consciousness held together by so many different things over time, it has created and defined itself according to what it chooses. But if there's enough enough of a collective consciousness opposing that, that's going to affect it, right? This happens between people. We recognize during the awakening process that we aren't necessarily all the things that people say, or certainly maybe not predominantly. And so we start taking all apart, and we take that off, and we remove ourselves of those labels. We take off those outfits that don't belong to us, that personify us, that give us or tell us what our personality and our intentions are behind that, the I am. And we say, no, I'm not. I am not. And then we sit back and go, well, what am I? And we start picking and choosing some things maybe that we feel are ideal based on social cultural expectations, or what we think would serve us. And if we stay aware, meaning keeping our internal consciousness more present inside of our being than outside of our being, and we stay aware to what's going on inside, our inner being, our inner universe starts telling us what it wants. The soul speaks to us from all the little micro parts and particles within us and says, this is why I'm here, and this is who I need to be, the character that I need to be in this incarnation. And we can work with that at the soul to persona level, the I am, the Aries constellation level, and say, okay, let's negotiate, because I still need this, this, and this. And then it grows and evolves over time, and everybody's needs and wants are met. This is what the constellation Aries is talking to us about. And it's speaking, they're speaking from a place of war, fighting, aggression, and harm to overtake and subjugate. Because we've got Mars parking his car in the constellation of Aries. And we have Eris, who's next door down the street from her brother, who's doing something different. And it just kind of is ticking Mars off a little bit more. So we've got all this fiery, and we're saying, okay, well then what is it? What is it? Aries, how are you influencing us in our dimensional clock of astrology? And an interesting thing occurred. So I was drawn to a book in my library that, well, let's just bring it forward. Oh, I almost dumped it on my little fur buddy's head. It almost fell. I was drawn to grab this book. It's called The Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi. And it's similar to The Art of War. This is a Japanese author from, I believe, the late 1500s. And I was fascinated, and it felt right, like Aries, war book. And this book is about the way of being a samurai, the way of fighting, not to win, but to master, to be masterful. And so I heard the guide say, okay, so we're going to have you open a page, and whatever that page is, we want you to change the narrative. And I was like, okay, I'm good at that. And then I opened to a page, and I was like, oh, no, this is not a narrative that I can find anecdotal shifts to, is it? And they said, and so I was getting ready to start opening to a different page, and they went, no. You agreed. Stay here. You can do this, Lillian. Okay. So I read it, and I sat, and I listened, and my own personalities, my own egos came in and said, no, it can't, and it was those parts of my I am self that are really stuck on war is war. Swords are swords, killing is killing. And the way it was written, I could feel some of the energy of the intent, as well as what the consciousness that over the last several hundred years, the consciousnesses of all the people who have read these ancient scriptures then and now and what they have imposed upon these words as to what they actually mean. And so this is a part of it. This is a part of the process, is being aware of that with every little thing within us in order to really shift who we are and change the narrative, not put a layer of cover-up paint. No, ma'am and sir, we are power washing this. And in a lot of cases, we're sanding it down or even removing some of the boards and replacing them with an eco-sustainable composite that lasts forever, right? And is sourced well, that kind of thing. So I'm going to read this, and then we're going to work through it a bit, and then we'll move on to the cards. And before, actually, I'm being told before we do that, let's do an overall card. And I'm asked to use the Sacred Earth Oracle. I was going to do a spirit animal, and I had that all shuffled and ready, and the request changed. Because the Sacred Earth Oracle has more images in it, and I'm hearing to extrapolate a more in-depth and nuanced meaning, one that can be more personified, where the spirit animal oracle cards still have a lot of rigidity to what each animal means. And the whole point of this exercise, the whole point of Aries constellation being here today, is they want us to understand how the difference in those feelings, so we can be alert to it and go, oh yeah, that has some rigidity, and for the purposes of this work in this moment, we're going to move to something that's more fluid and open and available to interpret, so that then we can go through the process of picking apart each piece and discerning what is truly accurate, not because strictly how we feel, but because we're in connection with our higher aspects. And that clear, clean, objective witnessing from the consciousness being in the heart space, and then blooming and blossoming throughout our universe. So this is really interesting. The card that came out as I was yammering on is the cover illustration for the whole box. And I didn't know that this was the word affiliated with it, but how perfect. Okay, so here we go, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody. This is the card of expectation. And at the end, I'll read the description, because they do have wonderful descriptions. So if you'd like to take a screenshot, feel free to. You can crop it and blow it up and look at all the details, and we'll go into it more later. I'm noticing on his back, it looks like a moth instead of the phoenix, right? There's this idea of, oh, you know, the phoenix rising with the kundalini. And here, oh, pardon me, it's not a male figure, it's a feminine figure. Again, what we think we see is not always as it appears. Let's go deeper, look more clearly. So yeah, not a snake, not a phoenix, not a butterfly. We've got a moth moving up the spine as a kundalini ascension. So, hot dog. Right, buddy? My dog. He's like, oh, it's a lot of energy, Ma. Okay. So, do I need to give any more context for this? I don't think so. Let's get into this. The page I opened to on this particular version of the book is page 85. It says the water book. You know, I've not... Oh, so he did. I was going to talk to you about the 4 and 5 elements of Japanese philosophy, and I still will. Yeah, so he's segmented each chapter in terms of element, And this is the water book. And it's called The Five Approaches. I'm going to show you because it's a beautiful book and there's gorgeous illustrations. And then, of course, the original Japanese script with the modern English translation. So we have to take that at face value, of course, because things are always lost in translation as well as over time. We're going to read it, allow it to seep in, and you can take time with it on your own. Certainly don't have to believe anything that I message through me or that Aries, the constellation, and my guides message through me by any means. A picture that I took flew out. That might come in. I forgot I had a picture, an actual photograph that I took with real film back in the 90s. Yeah. All right, let's read this. The Five Approaches. The first approach is the middle attitude. Confront the enemy with the point of your sword against his face. When he attacks, dash his sword to the right and ride it. Or when the enemy attacks, deflect the point of his sword by hitting downwards, keeping your long sword where it is. And as the enemy renews the attack, cut his arms from below. This is the first method. The five approaches are this kind of thing. You must train repeatedly, using a long sword in order to learn them. When you master my way, capital W, like the Tao, the Tao of the sword, when you master my way of the long sword, you will be able to control any attack the enemy makes. I assure you, there are no attitudes other than the five attitudes in the long sword of natal. So there's a lot to recontextualize here, because this, at the surface as we read it, is very Mars, right? Very training of the sword, training to kill these. So the author, really quickly, Musashi, he was of the samurai class, whom during this time, many centuries of fighting and warring, civil warring primarily in Japan, there were classes. There was the samurai, the artisans, the merchants, and the farmers. And the samurai were also the lords, so to speak, the kings of the nation. And long story short, things shifted and kings became kings. Farmers became like the low class, essentially slaves. They had to stay on their property and give most of their stuff away to the lords, the kings. And then the merchants and the artisans made pretty good money. They could build themselves up. But the samurai became irrelevant in a way, because there was a period of, it wasn't peace, but there was a period of strict governance. So they became the shogun, which were in a way often mercenaries. But also there was a period of time where the shogun became sword masters and created schools for sword training for more future samurai or shogun league, so to speak, right? And so this was, Musashi was one of the things that he did. He created a school of thought and practice. So this is the framework of where he's coming from. But we have to remember that Japan is a nation, always has been, a nation that imbues the spirit, the interconnectivity, the conscious awareness and presence of more than what is seen, the occult. This is a very integral part of the Japanese culture. And so to them, something like a school of swordsmen, of samurai, is also a spiritual endeavor, and that's included in this. And so we're gonna talk about that. And let's keep in mind that in the tradition, I know this with China, I'm not sure how it goes with Japan in terms of history, but in China, pre-communism control, there were 5-element traditional Chinese medicine. Now, when communism took over, the ruler, the emperor at that time, had made an ordinance that all of the old traditions of Chinese medicine and philosophy and theology be burned. It was a massive nationwide book and history burning. So they went from a 5-element, earth, wind, fire, water, metal being spirit, to 4 elements. But not all traditions were lost. People were able to speak it through generations, of course. And Japan, I believe, still holds to a 5-element theory. So when we speak of swords in the 4-element, this is important. When we speak of swords in the 4-element context, it's important to keep in mind the element of air, right? We see that in Hermeticism and the Tarot, and air can represent the sword. So we think about that and what that means outside of a physical sword. And thought, of course, comes up in the Tarot. Thinking, the thinking mind. This thinking mind, not this thinking mind or the gut, which, and I bring those two up because science has showed time and time again that both the heart and the lower GI, the intestines, have a more detailed, elaborate, and stronger cognitive influence on the body than the brain. We've just leaned heavily on that and made it so. So there's an institute called Heart Math in Northern California, I think, that uses incredible science to demonstrate all the everything. Check it out. So the heart has its own mind. And in traditional Chinese medicine, again, I can't speak to Japanese, it wasn't my field of study, but there are a lot of overlaps. So in TCM, the heart is considered the emperor. The pericardium is the general. And then we move on and on. The liver is also kind of a general too. So the heart is the emperor of the body, or the empress of the body. We're kind of going into a bit of this philosophy, quite a bit, but it is pertinent to get to the points that I'll be making on this, as well as you working out what works for you as well, right? And then how it can all come together for everybody. So, the sword. He discusses using the sword as a form of art. So we're going to go through the sentences. And I want to say here, I think I'll break this up into 2 readings. Well, we don't know. You'll know before I do when you watch this. If this will be a part 1 and part 2, or just a very long video. All right, so the first sentence. The first approach is the middle attitude. Okay. So attitude, again, is intent, and Aries just spoke to that. The intent, are we coming from a place of patience and not needing to dominate, of everybody gets to win in a way, everybody gets to develop and evolve and find a way to work together? Or are we coming from a place of dominion or oppression, or taking our inner wounds out and abusing others? Of course, generally people aren't aware that that's coming through with their intentions until they start getting really aware. And you'll know, you know if you're on it with that. So the first approach is the middle attitude. And here again, we're going to that space of the heart and the solar plexus in the center, which is called the middle dantian, the middle burner, lower, middle, and upper burners. Sources of energy. Mars, fire. Confront the enemy with the point of your sword against his face. The first thing I hear when I read that is confront the enemy. It would be somebody who is trying to oppose me, for instance, in my truth. So in what I believe is true and right, the samurai recognizes that his belief systems are true, right? He's told that. But here I'm coming from a place of what I know is true for me and the witnessing. And so I'm pointing my sword at this person's face. To me, that says eye to eye. I'm looking them right in the face, seeing who they are, eye to eye, with clarity, without emotional reactivity. Boom. And without shutting them down and shutting them out and making them wrong. Look at them in the face, see the truth of it, and being in that middle attitude of I'm aware, I'm listening, and I'm allowing. It's an allowance, right? Not a shutting out or shirking from or punching in the face. When he attacks, dash his sword to the right and ride it. The right, so generally the right hand was the dominant in swordplay, and so dashing it to the right would be basically, he's saying, taking their attack, a verbal attack, a thought, a psychic attack, an energetic attack, a gossipy girls slandering and gaslighting or men, attack, an underhanded, backdoor, passive-aggressive attack, what's another kind that people commonly use? There's the obstinate, I don't care attack, something that they know would wound you. You go to the dominant thing that they're leaning on, the dominant hand, the dominant sword, the dominant thought, and you strike it to the ground and you ride it all the way down to the ground. So we are here again talking about riding it down into what's below us, the underworld. And what happens in the underworld when we get sent in our consciousness to the underworld, we have to go down into the dark, into the Pluto world where poison is medicine, and we have to face ourselves. We have to unveil and reveal ourselves raw and true. So bringing that verbal or mental attack down to the ground, going with them, riding with them all the way down, taking them to the first gates of their personal hell, the hell that will allow them to see the truth of who they are, not as a punishment, but as a revelation. That's the middle intention, right? The middle attitude. And that's clean and clear. This again is the sword coming from a place of spirit, of higher awareness and recognition, which when the ego is involved or cellular memory, emotions are involved, that gets all muddled. So that all needs to be surrendered and opened to, so we have those higher wisdoms, our higher self, or if you use God or goddess, however you want to refer to it, that knowing that is that opening as a channel to the clear and clean, non-emotional, non-reactivity, but also causational, not to overcome, but to produce better results and to stop others from perpetuating ill results, harmful results. Okay? All right, so we rode that blade to the right, or to the ground. Or when the enemy attacks, deflect the point of his sword by hitting downwards, keeping your long sword where it is. And as the enemy renews the attack, cut his arms from below. Okay, that's a long sentence. Deflects the point of hitting it downwards again, keeping your long sword, your focused psychic consciousness attention is your long sword. That's too much coming in. That is what we're keeping focused, bringing it down. And then when the enemy renews his attack, you lift the sword and cut his arms off from below. And I'm going to say the next sentence too, because it's important. Oh, never mind. It just says this is the first method. Okay. How do we want to shift this, Spirit? I think we need to go to the next sentence, or couple sentences, to put the whole thing together. The 5 approaches are this kind of thing. You must train repeatedly using a long sword in order to learn them. And this is not making sense. When I read it before, okay, I know why. Basically because it says you're returning, that's what it is. You're returning your sword up in the direction that it came from. And what I got when I read that initially is I was shown images of the practice of Tai Chi and Qigong, and how when returning the blade, the thought, the focus back up in the direction from where you came. So having it, bringing their ill thoughts and intentions down to the underworld, and then bringing it off and cutting the arm, metaphorically speaking, we're not actually attacking people, right? Cutting the arm off the enemy by returning your own sword back in the direction where it came from is a maneuver of Tai Chi. You know, we see people doing Tai Chi in the park or in movies, and they have this beautiful fluidity and movement and sway. Well, it's a martial arts, and a true master of Tai Chi is trained and recognizes that they will utilize the force and momentum of their opponent against them. So often you can see one of the Tai Chi masters that I worked with, his master he was telling me this woman whom was in her youth, you know, just incredibly strong and quick and fluid and speedy. But as she got older, in her later senior years, people would question, you know, does your Tai Chi, can it really still have that fluid counter positioning strength that is required to fend off your opponent and have them defeat themselves with their own attacks? And the truth is even though her body couldn't move at all the same, she had honed and refined her skills to such a place that she could stand. I'm reminded of the Kung Fu Panda cartoon. We've kind of seen that in some of it. But she could stand in one place and spar with other people, and they would come at her, and she would just shift a little, and boom, they were down. Boom, they'd whack themselves in the face. Boom, right? So this is what we're talking about. And we're doing this in a way not from an attitude, a middle way, not from an extreme attitude of mocking or diminishing or belittling or harming or attacking, assaulting. No, we want their inertia of harm to come back and smack them in the face, because that's how they learn. So it's really from a place of compassion with severity in wisdom, right? This is what we're doing when we're working in fields of, you know, monarchs or presidents and so forth in our world, on the global stage right now, that are of that fear program based dominion over warmongering. And there's all the history of why this is happening. We know that for the most part. And we think, well, how could I affect a world leader or a national leader in Russia or Ukraine or the United States or Pakistan or all the areas, everywhere? How could I, sitting here with my thoughts, with my consciousness, with my middle attitude, middle way of intent, how can I affect that? You can, right? It's one drop and then it ripples. I'm temporarily staying in an apartment building right now where the consciousness just got me for a long time while I was living here. And as over time, and I did the work, and I would allow the consciousnesses that I knew weren't mine, that I knew were limited and hurtful, and I was picking up bad habits without even talking to anybody, like eating habits or whatever, that weren't ever anything in my purview. I was like, why am I eating like this, or these kinds of things? And then I would start, oh, right, why am I speaking like this, or having these thoughts that would be nasty or vindictive or all kinds of different things. And of course, I've done this work enough and long enough that I would, oh, okay, I'm catching that. That's not me. And I put a pin in it, an energetic pin. I focus my long sword, the sword of the samurai, the master of sparring and engaging and battling with minimal exertion, letting the other opponent defeat themselves by their own. So I would utilize these tools to allow them to, their thought forms or consciousnesses, and my neighbors certainly weren't, for the most part, intending to attack me psychically or anything like that. They're just doing their thing, and it's happening because, of course, they're still not very conscious of themselves and their thoughts and their subconscious. They haven't connected yet, and they're super conscious. So they're doing their thing, but I'm still getting whammied. And of course, there's always that, as we're developing and learning the practice, the discipline. One second, gotta have my ninja juice. Ninja juice. It's because it's called a ninja berry, which is grown in central China, by the way. It's a gummy berry, but it's a very special one. I'm excited. I can feel it, the energy of Mars and Aries, these siblings of alchemical fire. I'm just getting chills. They're just, yeah, Lillian, keep going. And Aries is like, yeah, now we're getting it. So it's such fun doing these different readings and having these different signatures come in and work with me. So, okay. Yeah, so I'm allowing these energies to come at me once I catch that I'm being saturated and infiltrated. And I'm like, oh, right, this isn't me. I'm not these labels. And then instead of reacting going, ooh, so-and-so, or ooh, so-and-so, I remember, oh yeah, they're not these labels either. These are programs, conditionings, and cultural ways of being that don't belong to them. They just haven't had the opportunity and all the constituents, all the ingredients needed to give them what they need to shift all this. So I'm that first drop in the ocean in this little area. And I've been watching over the last year plus this community that is kind of, I mean, everybody's in their business the way this building is shaped, whether they want to or not. I've been watching it shift and change, from the individuals here to how mail delivery functions to the landlord. And it's not huge yet, but for some people it has been. And the general shift has been significant. And that's rippling out. They don't even know it yet, most of them. Well, they certainly, yeah. I mean, it's whatever it is, it's their journey, right? I'm here to do my work and to make sure that I'm in integrity with whom I choose to be. So, the sword. I kind of lost track. That was just so much fun. Okay, I want to finish this, and then there's one more paragraph before this that explains this a bit better, and it'll wrap it up for us. So we talked about bringing the sword down and then bringing it up and cutting the arm off the enemy, cutting the extension of force and energy, right? Their sword arm is their sword. I've heard many individuals speak of sword fighting being that the sword is an extension of the arm and the body, right? So he says, you must train repeatedly using a long sword in order to learn them. When you master my way of the long sword, you will be able to control any attack the enemy makes. I assure you, there are no attitudes other than the 5 attitudes of the long sword of Nito. So really quickly, we'll read this paragraph on the page before, which is the little mini introduction of It's entitled The Way of the Long Sword. And this is important for everything that we just discussed. Knowing the way of the long sword means we can wield with 2 fingers the sword we usually carry. So important. And keep in mind the idea of, throughout history, all the goddesses and gods, especially ancient Hinduism and, well, just so many cultures. And we often see this. The Buddha. Okay. If we know the path of the sword well, we can wield it easily. If you try to wield the long sword quickly, you will mistake the way. To wield the long sword well, you must wield it calmly. If you try to wield it quickly, like folding a fan or a short sword, you will err by using short sword chopping. You cannot cut a man with a long sword using this method. When you have cut downwards with the long sword, lift it straight upwards. When you cut sideways, return the sword alongside the sideways path. So as we were saying before, well, I'll bring that back up. Sorry. That's all right. Okay. Returning the sword along the sideways path. Return the sword in a reasonable way, always stretching the elbows broadly. Wield the sword strongly. This is the way of the long sword. If you learn to use the 5 approaches of my strategy, you will be able to wield a sword well. You must train constantly. So the author mentions returning. So an attack being delivered is to be returned back in the same way. And that to me speaks of taking responsibility for choice. Whatever we put out there, we must, and say it out loud, I take responsibility for my choices. We must be able to allow what comes back. So if somebody's coming at you with a verbal such and such, whether directly or indirectly, if as the samurai of spirit, ooh, we like that, as the samurai of spirit, we wield a force because allowing them to go around us isn't quite enough. But we wield a force of thought that we know is cutting and disarming. If we can do it, we must do it from that middle way intention of non-judgment. Not that they're great and we feel sorry for them, not that they're evil and deserve to be punished, from a way of I'm making a choice to cause an action, and I also choose to take responsibility for that choice. I choose to be able to respond if and when my arm is severed off because I'm not paying attention, metaphorically speaking, and I wield a sword at somebody because I got caught in emotion or whatever, an old program. I'm choosing to allow the universe to bring that same type of return back, knowing that the intention of that comes from a place of pure and true intent, of assisting me in becoming a better person. So now there's no longer a need for me to engage with anyone or anything, or to feel anything coming at me that does cause me harm on an obvious level. There's no reason for me to feel like that was some sort of malicious intent, because I know my intents, what they were. And so now I know that that's what the universe brings back, regardless of what it looks like. I don't need to get caught up in the distraction of evil versus good, malintent versus, that is such a distraction. And we give away our power, we give away our energy by getting caught up in the raw of that. Not that raw is bad, But in this case, when there is an engagement like this, to be able to be in a stance, that grounded, knees bent, hips broad, pelvis tucked in, energy completely aligned with the spine, connected to the earth and the cosmos. You see that in every martial arts formation, where the weight is completely and powerfully distributed and grounded, as well as, like in Tai Chi, when you move from one foot to the other, the entirety of the balance can shift in a smooth and deliberate instance from one foot to the other and then back to balance. This is what we're talking about when in the mental emotional engagement of others and the world around us. And Mars, bless you, formerly angry, reactive, warring archetype. This is in your chart and in mine and in all the individuals out there playing out the characters that they were imposed upon. This is what Mars, the Mars aspect of each one of us, is becoming into, opening up to, and learning how that applies to them. And so we're developing, these are basic pillars that we're talking about here. This is going to be such a bigger, more in-depth and incredible conversation about this archetype that resides within all of us and within cultures, nations, species as a whole. Species as a whole, whether predatory animals or people, we're seeing this shift. And the more consciousness is put into that within our own selves, the more that reverberates to the consciousness of others, and it penetrates, because that is what the spirit of the sword, air, the psyche, the horizontal influence of the singular and the collective consciousness, that's what it does. And Mars, this physical incarnation of identity, I am, is totally restructuring not only who he is, but how that gets to apply. And it's going to be more fun and artistic and creative. And just like how Tai Chi is this beautiful, one of truly the most powerful forms of martial arts, and culturally, all of us in the West have no clue for the most part, unless you've studied it, that this is a very weaponized, healing martial arts that was created with the intention of not having to be weaponized as a dominion over, but to be used as a tool. The sword, again, can be a weapon or a tool, but to use it as a tool that fosters self-reflection and awareness. And boy, nothing ignites self-awareness more to somebody who's coming at you with angry intent than a smack in the face of their own inertia, right? They're running at you and they step on that bottom side of the rake and the pole just whacks them in the face, and they have nobody to blame but themselves. Now they might blame you for all the, but at some point they go, wait, no, I did that. And then comes the responsibility upon and within themselves, the ability to respond based on their intentions, who they were, what it was all about, and why do they keep smacking themselves in the face every time they come at somebody that they think is in the wrong. There's got to be something more to it, and it causes pause. And Mars is learning the value of pause. Mars got that during his time in retrograde in Cancer last year, and he's getting it again. Was it last year? I don't know. Time. Yeah, you know. So I believe we're going to be stopping here. Well, I'm going to read the description for the overall card. We won't do any more cards beyond that. My dog, I have to show you this. He's sitting on the picture. A little butthole was on my picture. This is a picture I took in Eastern Washington. I woke up, I had been at a concert at the Gorge, and we were camping at Potholes Lakes nearby. And I woke up, and this was the scene that I saw when I came out of my tent. I went and ran and grabbed my SLR camera and did a quick little photo of this. And it has been just a prized, let's get it into focus, image that I took. This one sunrising moment you can kind of see in the middle of the image. I don't know if you can see it. It's a little rowboat with a couple fishermen out there catching their early morning fish. So my dog Whittle, he was sitting on it. All right, expectation. A, B, C, D. Yes, I still say the alphabet. All right, here we go. Let's get the card. This is such a great long video. Thank you everybody for staying for the duration of it too. And if you could definitely hit the like button, leave a comment. It supports me. It's a great reciprocity of currency and exchange. It's an initiation for that. And we want that, right? We want exchange of energy. This is abundance. Abundance doesn't hold still. It flows and it's fluid and it moves to and from, through me to you and back again. So we want to keep that moving. So thank you. And however you choose to express that from that middle attitude, right? Okay. Blink. Expectation. Let's see if I can't get that in here a little bit so you can see it again. I don't know if it's my eyes. All right. Earthly meaning. Confront your ideas about a situation, a relationship, or yourself. Thank you, universe. Thank you, Aries. Constellation. Poke, dare, and test your expectations. If it is real, it will remain. Be honest, reflective, and determine if an accepted truth is truly serving you and those you care about, and I'll add the world as a whole. Consenting to things turning out okay is settling for less. Expect more for yourself and your circle. Let go of what you know to make way for wisdom. Inspiration breaks through expectation like a lightning bolt. It awakens inside you, shatters doubt, and fills your life with creative energy. Every day you are the creator of a new world. Be the creator of a fairer, more inspiring, and positive one. Shift perception, raise expectation, and burst into a new horizon. How very Mars. Hope anticipates better days ahead. Happiness makes better days today. Insight. At the very brink of your perception, the horizon gives way to tiptoeing sunrises. Oh my gosh, what did we just look at that picture of? I'm going to say it again. Say it again. At the very brink of your perception, the horizon gives way to tiptoeing sunrises, surprising sunsets, and imposing mountain ranges. It marks the point where steady inference tips over into wild imagining. Persist in one direction for long enough and you will reach your current tipping point. What do you expect to find when you get there? The mountain you scale may be followed by an even higher mountain. The distant sunset may reveal an island paradise or yet another distant sunset. Before you chase fulfillment over the next horizon, turn your search within. Happiness is not conditional on what lies ahead, but on how you respond to the here and now. Responsibility, ability to respond. That's me. Let go of what you know. Forge pathways, knock down assumptions, breach your horizons, and be home once more. I mean, could that be any more perfect of an invitation for Mars to become? Thank you, everybody. I am so grateful for your presence in everything that you are, in all of it, in all the shades and shadows, colors, spectrums, and dimensions. I love you so much. Aho.